You're listening to TeaLife Audio, a podcast about the Japanese way of tea and related arts. For show notes and other resources, go to tealife.audio.
Welcome to TeaLife Audio. This is episode 129. My name is Marius.
My name is Adam.
And today we had a guest, Sarah. Say hello.
Hello. Nice to be with you.
It's great to have you.
Great to have you on.
It's been a long time. We studied a little bit together in Hiroshima a while back. And of course, you probably see Adam every week.
Yes. Yeah. In the last year and a half, it's been back to a near weekly schedule. But we had a little break because we just moved across the country. So getting back into it.
So where do you live?
At the moment, I'm in the state of Maine.
State of Maine. I wish I knew where that was.
It's not so far from Canada. Which politically is looking like a great alternative.
You're actually not too far from Anthony, if Anthony was on tonight.
That's true.
He's in Long Island.
Yeah, we'll have to make that trip.
Yeah. I only know the locations of the states I've been in. Yeah, so you've been studying with Adam for a while.
I think since 2016? Or is it?
Probably.
2016.
Something like that.
I remember it was first made contact, I was in Melbourne, and I was in Melbourne in 2016 to do a few things, like a 24-hour thing I was doing around about the time we contacted you first, I think. So it would be 2016. A long time.
I know, and that video that you made was so touching, so we're coming up on the anniversary, of course, of the bombing of Hiroshima. But yeah, that video, that sort of endurance sport of the 24-hour event spoke to me. And
Yeah, 24 hours is a astoundingly long time to sit on the floor.
I have a very nice cushion underneath my knees. The first time I didn't, and I swear that I'd never do it again. It's the hardest thing I've done in my entire life.
Yeah, I don't feel like in the video you had the cushion throughout. It comes in at a certain point. It seems like it's in the wee hours of the morning. And then there's a cushion all of a sudden. It's like, oh yeah, I know why that's there.
So
why did you decide to learn tea?
I actually went to study architecture because of my love of Japanese tea houses. And I had an urasenke experience in San Francisco when I was in school. And fell in love with the atmosphere. It was one of their public evenings, so there was a lot of guidance about how to be a guest, and nothing was really expected of us. But I was really touched. I was really touched by the space and the generosity of the hosts, and kind of coupled with my love of tea house, just trying to make sense of these passions. And I kind of felt like unless I was in a city like San Francisco or New York, or if I was, oh my God, in Japan, that maybe it would make sense to study Chano-yu, but short of that, it seemed sort of hopeless. And then Adam published the video, and I actually reached out. I wasn't looking for a teacher. It wasn't sort of explicit in that way. I just, out of admiration, I wrote to him, and I said, this was remarkable. You've inspired me to try and answer this question about how I might learn. And he said, well, you're in luck.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, it was a really nice exchange.
So you started learning online?
I started online, I think it was a year before I met Adam in person. I went and had a week or something like that in France, but it was a year of, just answering so many, basic questions and doing it at a distance. And I don't know, it was profound. I felt like it really made it possible to appreciate that experience in person. It was definitely high speed. I think there were more than a few nights when I came back to my Airbnb in tears. It was just like, whoa, this is drinking from a fire hose. There's so much here and so much to hold on to and so much for the senses. I think that's a lot of recreating that sensorial experience at a distance falls to the practitioner. And so to have that sort of coupled with Adam's hospitality in person and the food that he was making and going to markets together and making simple kaiseki food and and also just the smells and the incense and the charcoal and just, chop wood, carry water of it all. But the facsimile that I was able to recreate in that time, and since then, of course, in my own space, is some days it's pretty good. Some days it's, it feels like it's the thing, and other days it feels like this is a long bridge. But for the most part, it's been transformative.
But how did it work before you met in person?
I mean, it was Skype calls, right?
Yeah.
But you had all the utensils or access to utensils, so...
Well, I was, all forward momentum for a few years prior to meeting Adam on tea, but I had no teacher, so it was just kind of chaos. So I had a lot of teaware, but I had to get a lot of things for Chanoyu that I didn't possess. And there were many exciting moments when big packages would arrive from Japan. I still have some of those earliest receipts when there were handwritten notes coming from Japan, or they really felt, to me, it really meant something. It was this, smell things, this faraway land in communication with me. It was really touching.
So you learned first fold of fukusa online.
Mm-hmm.
It's an achievement in patience in both ends, I think.
I think the first fukusa I had didn't actually have the family crest on it. And I think I folded it the wrong way. And there was also an element of using an iron. And so it was a classic moment of like, I just ironed in the wrong crease. Bravo.
You're not the only one, Sarah.
Yeah.
I had this is a long time ago, that people said that it would be impossible to learn tea in any other way than in person. And I always wanted to do that challenge to kind of see if it was possible to teach our students from scratch. And I think you're sort of the proof that it's possible.
Well, that's really sweet.
Yeah.
I don't actually want to know what Adam thinks on that subject.
No, I think it's totally possible. It can be a matter of patience sometimes, but the Ueda Sokoryu is a bit lucky too, because it's not as sophisticated as some other schools, I think, in the movements. Can be at times, but I think with all things considered, there's like some fundamentals, and once you get them, you're pretty much right. You can just extrapolate from those. So we're pretty lucky in that way. But yeah, the fukusa is definitely the hardest thing, and then probably the chakin, like from scratch, like preparing the chakin in the mizuya and all the little stuff that you do to squeeze it out and all that, because it ends up in the temai and koichi later on. But once you get past those two things, you off you go. It's okay. And if people think that it's too difficult to learn online, it's their problem, not the problem, because there's more than enough examples now. Probably at least 20 people that I've started teaching from scratch online that are now thriving and getting their diplomas and all that sort of stuff. So if you have a problem, if you think it doesn't work, it's probably your problem, not the online problem.
I always was a believer that it was possible. I'm even a believer that if you're motivated enough, you could study only from a video and probably kind of get the movements. And there's lots of books where you could read a lot of the things a teacher would say. You would never probably get 100%, or right. You might be more efficient to learn in person, but still, it's doable.
Yep, totally agree with you. I'm sure there are people actually studying your videos, Marius, that are doing it themselves and think that they're doing fine. They have one lesson with the teacher. I bet they'd get like about 50 hours watching a video in like 1 hour. Probably. But I'm sure there's people out there doing that.
Yeah, I think it should be possible, preferable with the in-person teacher, I think. But
that's right.
Some of us can't manage that, so.
Well, it's kind of an interesting point. I feel like in the book Pearl Among the Clouds, there's the Grand Master's attempt to write it down in a really approachable fashion in the final parts of the book, like what it might look like to try and host, and there's etiquette in there and sequence and a whole, as I say, sort of like noble effort to make tea ceremony something that could be as simple as a set of directions, step-by-step manual.
Yeah, step-by-step without fussing about the details, I think. And that's maybe the hardest thing I see when I give a bowl of tea to someone that doesn't know anything, is to get them to just drink the bowl. Just enjoy the bowl, don't fuss, just enjoy the bowl. Everybody tries to figure out the special magical ritual that has to be followed, instead of just picking up the bowl and enjoying the liquid and the atmosphere and everything around, and then you can learn about turning and bowing and returning some other day. But without fail, if someone sees someone do it first, everybody tries to do the same thing afterwards.
To distill that, maybe you could just say, bow out of humility and don't drink from the front of the bowl. Turn it a bit. If you get those, maybe people will feel satisfied or something with information. But yeah, it's nice if they just do whatever they think.
That would be the best.
Yeah, I think that was probably, if there is a place where I feel anemic as a student, it's in being a guest, because I've had so little experience being a guest in other people's gatherings. And there's so much that you're experiencing in those situations. And so I remember the first time I actually had tea that Adam made, I just went completely blank. It was like everything that I thought I had learned. It was just like, tea. Drink tea.
That's good.
Try not to cry, which I think I did too. It was, yeah, so it probably was perfect in that way.
Yeah, it can totally relate. When you come somewhere, especially if it's a surprise, like I went somewhere and suddenly there was tea bowls, and you're like just so into the atmosphere that proper etiquette just out the window. It's never seen again.
Yeah, the first time I was at Wafudo, I had been traveling, and I think that for whatever reason my itinerary was Olympic in duration. It was 40 hours or something like that. I don't know what I had done wrong. I went through Seoul. And so by the time I got to Wafudo, I was a basket case, and put down my bag, and Adam was like, tidy up. We're going to go meet the Grandmaster right now.
Yeah, you had the most whirlwind arrival of anybody who could arrive for that. That was hardcore, Sarah. Yeah.
But I was really touched by this space. I don't know if he was aware. It felt like he was aware of how much potential anxiety might have been waiting for him in that room, in me. And tea came out and sweets came out, and there was a lot of room to just settle and to be. And I was really moved by the sophistication.
Beautiful, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's like your first real concrete experience in Japan. Like you arrived, and I was like, messaged me or emailed me somehow when you landed. I was like, get the first taxi you can. You need to get here because we're meeting with the Grandmaster in 30 minutes. and there you were. And then you're in Wafudo talking with the Grandmaster of your tea school that you'd come to do an intensive with the first real concrete full experience in Japan. It's pretty memorable.
Yeah, isn't it always like that? I mean, it must be, right?
Yeah.
I think that depends a lot on school, because Sokoryu is a bit smaller than some of the other schools, and you don't just get invited to Urasenki's Oimoto for tea without kind of prior notice.
Yeah.
And even if you get prior notice, I think it's pretty rare.
Yeah, that experience was not lost on me. It was, I don't know that I should count on it being repeatable, and I drank in every moment.
So I saw your name in the Pearl Among the Cloud book. Can you tell me a little bit about the journey on the book? Where did you get involved with the translation and
I think I was looking back at my notes on that one, and we had essentially 2 iterations. So I think it was in 2018 that we started. It was before going to Japan. And is that right? Or was after? Was it after? Now I'm confusing things.
No, it was before, because I gave the first complete draft to Iamoto on that trip. So
maybe it was 2017.
I think so, yeah. It's been a long time coming. Yeah, I gave him a full draft on that trip in hard copy. Yeah, we were communicating about the book before then.
Yeah, and so I think that there was some sense of wanting to help you out, and it felt like it was an internal effort, that maybe it was for the shachu. We were going to, have this little book, or almost like a pamphlet, and I had, I'd done enough book design and design work in general that I was really comfortable with one of the platforms for doing it. And I just thought, well, this will be easy, you know? This will be so easy.
I remember now, Sarah. Yeah, I wanted to. That was my way, because like he's a big guy, right? And you don't give a half-baked thing and say, I want to publish this. So I got it to the stage where it was pretty schmick, so I could present a printout of the hard copy and say, I want to publish this. You need to help me. And so yeah, you were helping me, convincing him to publish. That's how I remember now. Yeah, there we go.
There we go. Yeah, that was the missing link. I was trying to figure that out. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then, so I guess from that first phase, then there was a waiting to find out if that was something they wanted to pursue. And then
that's right.
Last spring in the pandemic, I guess it was time. It became time to see it through. So we went at it again. But at that point, I think the formatting had changed.
In the limbo period, he wanted to get somebody to proofread the hard copy before he'd put his name. And that's quite good practice. Like, get somebody to check my translation, and he wanted to get somebody at Wafudor to do it. But there's not many people at Wafudor that have a level of English that are able to do something like that. But then Nagano-san, who's in New York now, so he was going to New York. So as part of his training to go to New York, he got tasked the proofread of Film in the Clouds. And so then he was starting to do that, and he let me know that he was starting to do that. I'm like, oh, there's movement at the station. And then as part of the pandemic, I was releasing to my patrons 3 times a week an episode, because there's very small chapters in Film in the Clouds, and they have a very profound message, and I thought that might assist people. So that was a way of brushing it up while getting feedback from Nagano-san about things that Iyamoto wanted changed or something like that. And then somehow organically we started working again from there, I think, if I recall correctly.
So if you translate the title word by word, I know it's not Pearl Among the Clouds. What is the title just word by word? The original? It's
Hibi Goidan Nakiyo. That's, oh God. There's been a lot of waiting to get approvals for different twists of translations that I've done. And some of actually very marvellous ones suggested by Sarah with her brilliant mind. But this is probably the most significant one, apart from the stuff about difference in the sexes in tea, which wouldn't have translated very well to English, that Sarah will probably bring up later on, was the title, because it comes from his Zen teacher, Harada Roshi, of One Drop Zen. And at the end of a session, he says to all the people who attended the session, which is the intensive period of meditation over a week, you're going back out into the world now, Hibi Goidan Nakiyo, which means Hibi is every day or each day, and Goidan is like your carelessness, like Go is honorific, so he's talking about your carelessness or your laziness. Naki is negation, so don't. Your, it's like compelling somebody, so don't be lazy every day. Something like that. Don't waste your days. And like, you're not going to put a title of a book as that in English. People are like, I'm not going to buy this thing. Like, don't tell me what to do. But of course, it's very, very hard to give that backstory to somebody and expect them to understand, because it's quite foreign cultural.
It's all about the reference. You need to kind of get the reference if it's going to work, especially on a cover of a book. I was talking about the last episode where you did the poem that Sven had. I really, really liked the poem. That builds a reference and that you can use for a poetic name or something. But without having the poem first, the reference is kind of useless. Yeah,
absolutely. The reference that I played on to create the title, the current title, was the Zen reference. So Pearl in the Clouds is actually a combination of 2 different capping phrases in that Zen handbook. And I kid you not, I was thinking about what to call this book for about 5 years. Seriously, I thought for 5 years every which way that I could twist this title and make it into something appealing. And when I was going through those capping phrases, Pearl in the Clouds sort of, to me, sums up the whole purpose of the book, which is to cultivate dignified beauty in your person, so that amongst the clouds you can shine like a pearl. And it was the hybrid of 2 different capping phrases. So I thought, oh, there's a Zen link there. I'm going to call it this. And everybody loved it now, Shachu, when they read it. And it sort of people started to refer to the book affectionately as like Pearl even. And then when I gave the manuscript and Nagano-san checked it, one of the comments I got back on the PDF was, change the title. Make it, translate the original Japanese. And so as soon as I got it, I was like, on the phone to him, like, Nago-san, I am not changing the title. I said, I'll fight to the death. I don't care if I'm going head to head with the Grandmaster. I am not moving on this one. So we have to find out a way to explain. He's like, oh, just, send the reference and whatever. And so I quoted where it come from, and he was like, yeah, fine, no worries. Which shows the caliber of our Grandmaster. Like, what a bloody legend to just go, yeah, okay, I trust you, go for it, no worries.
It's a great title, and it's easy to remember, catching, and kind of very unique. It's not like when you search for it, there's 7 other things that are called the same thing.
Yeah.
So it could easily have been like the wisdom from tea, right? Or something else very boring, right?
Yeah.
But I think this is very good work on your part.
Ah, thanks. If you call it wisdom from tea or something, I think people would be a bit sceptical. But maybe this piques curiosity or something.
I feel like that story about the search for the title and the interaction with Wafudo and what was at issue was essentially kind of the challenge that we faced with the rest of the text too. And so there was kind of that first impulse to write, which was to create a book that was probably for non-teists in Japanese culture. And then insert, Adam Sensei and his shachu. Then there's an active translation to move it into another language, but more dramatically outside Japanese culture. And so what does that mean? And I think that was the challenge that you and I dealt with each time, and also this sort of sense of this book had a home, and it was written for Japanese people who understood that culture. And there's a lot in the book that sort of requires that the reader be apprised of that, know that, and then we took it out. Took it out a little bit.
Oh, no, you did some very, very noble moves to the text. It was incredible, the work you did. Because one thing that people will not know, because I haven't said it anywhere except for this podcast, which I'm going to say now, unless you've read it in Japanese and you're a Japanese speaker. The original purpose of the book was sort of to ride the wave of inspiring women in Japan, young women in Japan, to pursue something with a bit of chunky meaning. And so it was basically somebody had the idea of getting our Iemoto Uedasoke to write a book for a young female audience. And so we've shaped the book into a general audience, and some of those little appeals to a young female audience that sort of scattered here and there, not too relevant, not too frequent in the book, the actual Japanese text, but enough to make it clear that this is aimed at a young female audience. We had to sort of diffuse those and make it into a general audience, and tell Iemoto at the same time that this is what we're doing, and having him come along for the ride. Because when you take that aspect away, it becomes a very good distillation of the core messages of tea that anybody, even if they don't practice tea full on, if they're just making a bowl of tea for themselves in the morning, can follow and still get a lot from Cha-ire, even though they're not practicing it formally.
I reread it once I got the hard copy, because I read an early draft way back when. Then I was reading with some specific things in mind, and the relevance for non-tea people was one of them. And personally, I think that there's too many tea references for it to fly easily with non-tea people. So I would say it's, if I were gonna describe the book, it was an inspirational little book that could work for any person studying any school of tea. It has very few references to Ueda Sokoryu that kind of, this isn't relevant to me because type of things that you would find in many other books. It's more like, we have this example from this school, but you can easily adapt it to whatever school. But I think its largest appeal, my guess, is for tea people.
Yeah, ultimately it tries to encourage people to host tea gatherings and stuff in a very simplistic way at the end. So
yeah,
you sort of need to be grappling with tea in some way.
I feel like it's deceptively simple, though.
It's very true. I've had very many people say that same thing. One person, I had a comment, somebody in Australia said it was arrestingly simple, something like that. I thought that was a very way of saying it. It was so simple, but it makes you stop and think, like, what is this message? So it's like something that just floats in its simplicity, but is very profound at the same time. Hopefully. But yeah, that was really nice that people say that, because it's each chapter seems like oh yeah, but then when you think about it, it's like if I do this and do this consistently, what will my life become? Which is the whole point.
Yes, it's been a long journey. Are you starting a new joint project soon?
Don't know. Always, I'm sure. There's always something that's on the horizon that's emerging. No, I mean, I think that one of the provocations in the book is because it sort of rides this difficult and somewhat challenging line, which is to be relevant and to adapt what is ultimately a fairly sophisticated and form-intensive practice into something that works for folks. And so I think it's kind of the beauty of it. I mean, it shows up in the illustrations, which are simple, almost childlike. I didn't actually know the bit about it being intended for a female audience, which now makes sense. Makes all the sense in the world. And explain some of my grievances. But, it's also, there's a huge amount, as you say, sort of chunky depth that's there. There's this real effort to bring in Zen Buddhism and human cultivation. And so some of these, short lessons, they seem, as it says in the intro, like too simple to be of much benefit. But then in it, he'll have a Juko quote, and it will be about not being swayed by the opinions of other people in the world and having that color your whole sense of reality, to really do a fairly close internal interrogation into your values and to speak from that place. I mean, how profound. And that's just one of them.
You mentioned grievances.
Yeah, this is. I'm actually looking forward to this part of the conversation. Can you just go for it, Sarah? Because you made some very masterful suggestions on the text. Is there some particular things that stick out for you?
Well, I mean, I think that we had a struggle with point of view, and I think that that's, is it first person, is it second person, is it third person, and some of that was editorial. And I think that was fundamentally about, is the tone informal and casual, or is it much more formal, like a grandmaster speaking to one of his students? And so we struggled with that, and that was sort of editorial. But the places where I think, for me, there was more of a challenge. I mean, I don't need to go deeply into it. There were cultural differences. Like in the West, having your pinky raised is actually a sign of some kind of refinement, cultural refinement. Obviously, in Japanese culture,
it's not.
That's quite grotesque. Exactly. Splayed palms. Well, what is the significance of a palm? Bowing doesn't translate so well for us. And the dynamics and the mechanics of a bow. We have some bowing in this country, but it's definitely from another era and it looks different. So all of that stuff, which is cultural, I think that if you're being generous and you're reading this book, you see someone speaking strongly from within their own culture. Sometimes we're blind to our own culture. It's hard to see it when you're in it. I think the place where you and I probably worked the hardest was where you had the sense that there was a judgment that was being made about dignified beauty as it was seen from the outside. And that somehow this extrinsic motivation superseded the intrinsic motivation. So for me, one of the words, if I had any real contribution to this text, I would say that for me it was the word coherence. And so it was, okay, how do we actually talk about dignified beauty and its intrinsic benefit? It's coherence. And it isn't so much about how the world sees and perceives you. It's personal cultivation. And that makes more sense in the West. And also because in the West, group functioning, etiquette for us means manners. It means protocol. It means some things that are, troubling and problematic, and we're all identified with freedom and individuality, which is also problematic. In the Japanese culture, it's much more about the group and harmony within the group. So these are powerful differences, and they showed up in this project for sure. But for me, that word coherence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of examples in the Japanese text. It's the other side. It's like people will be looking upon you with these eyes if you do this. And a Western audience, especially an English-speaking Western audience, will be like, I don't care. You have to turn around the other way. Like, what's the benefit for the individual? There's just like the meaning is still there, like the basic teaching is still there, but the perspective of what's happening when you cultivate yourself in this way, what it means for the group or what it means for the individual, was one of the things we had to be very careful about, and not straying from the original text too much at the same time.
Yeah, no, I think that having it be, it sort of walks this fine line because it is about the external gaze. And I think probably if I had been in conversation with the Grandmaster when he was conceiving of this intro, I might have said, well, what is actually the pain point, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Where is it that people hurt that draws them to tea? And why do they practice? There's probably a deeper motivation than, you know, wanting to be perceived as beautiful. And I think that he gets at it, you know, even in his definition of etiquette, it's about respect. It's about respecting all life forms, and that you show it through these forms. It's how you walk, it's how you touch things. This is respect. And so the practice of these forms is your embodiment of respect and reverence. He didn't actually say reverence, but I don't speak Japanese,
very well
so
put.
respect might have
That's
been
very well to crystallise.
one available translation.
Well, there's some things in the book that stuck out to you that you remember, Marius, like some of the lessons, because there's some like key lessons that when I was preparing for episode, I just flicked through it thinking, what's going on here? And there's probably about 6 or 7 that have like actually become very central and essential to the way that I teach tea. So I'd be interested to hear both of you actually if there's anything in the book that has stuck with you.
For me, when I read it the first time, it was the daily system or routine or practice, setting some standards for where you want to be or who you want to be, and then day by day getting there. So I think those, and I like
you excel at this, Marius.
in some areas, but not in all. I have some practices I should be much better at.
Wow, the daily tea practice is something you're definitely excelling.
Yeah, that part I can do. No, but then also I like do tea. And it's kind of wrong to say about it in the podcast, but don't talk about it, don't write about it, don't think about it, don't procrastinate. Just like invite someone, do the best you can with the skills and stuff you have. And then once you've done it, you can see if you want to do something better next time. And kind of let's do it. Let's not wait.
Yeah, great. What about you, Sarah?
I think part 3 for me in the book was significant. I mean, again, it's kind of the practice brought to life, but it's perhaps before they start to enumerate, you know, the tea ceremony. It's about how you wake, listening to nature, cherishing each moment, meditating, creating a sanctuary, burning incense, listening to chimes, you know, and the part prior to that, part 2, which is about walking and standing and bowing and stride length and all the rest of it, that to me feels like it has more of the cultural challenge embedded in it. Part 3 starts to get to something that feels more universal, and then it shifts into, you know, the latter chapters, which are about how you'd actually host. And, you know, even though I said earlier in the podcast that there is this write-up, which was perhaps the Grandmaster's thought about making tea readily available, I actually think it's kind of a lie too. It may also be the way of bringing students closer, because again, I look at that stuff and the recipes being for Westerners a perfect example. It's like, I can't find most of this. This is you know,
a lot of the ingredients have been
if you kind of look at it from 3-act structure, right, it has the current situation where chapter 1 and 2 or part 1 and 2, what you're doing now and learning what maybe it should be, and then part 3 is sort of now the climax, and then part 4 is sort of so what to do about it now.
That's right.
Adam, I'd love to hear your take on this, because I feel like there were moments when we would go back and forth and you'd say, I just can't do it. I can't read it again. Like, I just can't, you know, and then, because you read it, I mean, 1,000,000 times, poor thing. And also, hopefully it stuck. So what's sticking?
Well, something that comes up with one of the things that appealed to you, like with, you wake 30 minutes earlier in the morning, and you don't turn on any lights, and you appreciate the natural light, and no music or anything, you just listen to the sounds coming from outside. That's something that's stuck with me. Like, as soon as I read that, it's like, oh my God, this is fantastic. I have to do this. And I started doing it immediately. Oh, this is back when I first got in Japanese. I was in Japan. And so I thought, natural light, only natural light in the morning. Resist the temptation, if it's a bit gloomy, to turn on the lights and just sit with the natural light, listen to the sounds of nature coming from outside. And so then when I'm at Wafudo and practicing, I always get up, first thing in the morning, and I'm down in Ankangte, the practice space, and Imoto comes down maybe 15, 20 minutes after I arrive there, because he sits zazen, and I'm getting ready for Keiko. And I don't turn on any lights. And he comes in every morning, and the first thing he does when he walks in the church is turn on the lights. And I'm there practicing getting in the Mizzio, just like in heaven. And I was, if he wasn't the grandmaster, I'd turn around and say, "What are you turning the bloody light on for?" But even more, in Pillar in the Clouds, he's got that lesson where you should appreciate natural light in the morning. And so one morning it got the better of me. I said, this morning I'm gonna have a go. I said, Pillar in the Clouds, just say that you should appreciate natural light in the morning. Why do you turn the light on every time you come in when I'm preparing the Mizzio? He said, Adam, do you wear glasses? And I said, no. And he goes, well, I do. My eyes aren't as good as you. I can't see. Boom, plain and simple. Then he went and sat in Zazen, like, no more talk about it. Oh, okay, fair enough. So there you go.
Night vision is the first to go when you age.
But anyway, so I had to go at him, but his response was pretty good.
I have had so many guests complain at my previous lighting arrangement. I was so happy with it. It was like, yeah, I only had these 2 lights hidden. No one can see them. They looked really good. And people like, I can't see anything. And I was like, it's fine. But now I've become a bit older and I start seeing what they meant.
Well, I'm not there yet, but I guess I will be shortly.
You'll get there.
Yeah. But the things, actually probably breathing, like the first couple of chapters, the first couple of sections, the breathing is something that stuck through me all my life, and the importance of breathing. Because it's like one of the central things of Uedasoku, breathing is really important in our school. And he explains it very simply there about what's going on with the breath. And it's not just like when you're doing tea, it's like when you conduct yourself in everyday life. Like what do you do with the breath, and what's a good breath to hold that promotes a dignified posture and a beautiful posture and a beautiful stance towards the world, I guess. And I remember when I was working full-time back in the day in office environment, these parts of the first few sections of the book where it talks about breathing and the posture, the very first, 5 entries, is something that I would always consciously bring back when I have my lunch break and I go for a walk, is refocus on the breath, refocus on the posture, like elongating the spine, reaching up, letting the ki or the chi of the heavens come down through the top of your head and invigorate and hold your posture, and then feel the subtle vibrations of the earth coming up through the bottom of your feet, and also strengthening and straightening and feeling supported by the greater environment around you, and inviting all that in through your breath is has been very influential in my life and also my teaching. So those first 5 chapters, I guess, it might be a little bit more, a little bit less, I'm not sure where it goes up to, but those are the standout ones for me, I guess.
Those were some of my favorite lessons as a student of yours, when, struggling in Seiza myself with the seat and my knees and all the rest of it, the challenge to try and connect heaven and earth. And I felt like the sophistication that you brought to that lesson was quite
It all comes out of that. Just extrapolating.
So these days, do you have a tea space in your new home?
I do. I've got 3 mats. It's not its own separate room. I'm sitting in it right now at my desk. So I don't really love having my computer in the same space. That's not my preference, but at the moment, it's what I'm working with.
You have to bring your architecture days back, Sarah, and start building a cha-ire somewhere there.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, there goes silence. I don't even know what the size of the property is. You might not have enough land there to build anything on, but anyway.
The roof is usually free.
That's true. You're in Norway, so I can't actually make comments about the snow, but these roofs are quite steep. Yeah, I don't know. I think, we'll see. I've been looking around. I've been casting about to see if there are any individuals here who have tea spaces, and there are a lot of gardens. A lot of really beautiful gardens and people who are inspired by tea, who do tea-like shelters and dwellings and all the rest of it. But proper tea houses that are available, rare. You guys know this. I assume you know this. Maybe it's different in other parts of the world, but the sort of enthusiasm for the tea space designed and built by those who can afford it, usually they remain off limits.
Yeah, and those that build it without studying often they try to grasp the aesthetics, but it often lacks some really important function pieces.
Like a misia, for instance.
Yeah, that's the
running
first.
Water.
Misia is, yeah, like my tea room at my cabin doesn't have running water, but I have access to running water in a different building. But I carry in a misugame, and which for me teaches me to be careful about how much water I spend. Not that usually is a concern in Norway, but still it's nice to bring that consciousness into it. But yeah, the Misia is one. Like I had a friend who built one, and he had 2 nijiri guchis. Right, so the host comes in through a crawling entrance. It's really, really hard. And there's many of these, or people who've just seen a few drawings and do, but this is what I could fit in my room. Okay. Yep.
That example got me. That's really cracking me up. I can't go. Yeah.
Host Nijiguchi.
But the hut is really nice. It's a 2-mat tiny hut with a straw roof, everything. I don't think there's hardly any nails in the whole construction. Overlooking a little pond with carps and a roji. So like it's everything else. And it's like I've tried so many times to tell him, can't you just carve a little bit bigger door? I mean, I can live with a meter high door. That might work. Then you can step through. But 60 centimeters of how tall it is, it's
Well, I guess as a host, you leave your ego outside as you belly crawl in.
Yeah.
One of the things that Iamoto should put in the book if he does a second rendition based design for an English-speaking audience would be the value of using things that are important. Because like at Wafudo, we still use like chawans that are made by Uedasoko. And they're like national treasures. Not those particular challenge, but there's other pieces that are national treasures, and they use them in Chakai. And then in the West, these tea houses are built, and they fly in a Japanese architect, and they build it. Then people can look at it from the outside, but nobody actually goes and uses it.
I've actually started using some of my nicer dogu, even when it's just myself. So just bringing out the nice stuff, just because. Otherwise, it's stuck in a box forever. And maybe if you're realistic about it, if you buy a nice cha-ire and you have a few other cha-ires, so how many charges are you going to do the rest of your life? And divide by number of cha-ires, so it's going to be used 10, 20 times for the rest of my life. So I'm more at, I miss it, I'm going to use it.
Yeah. You're a numbers guy, Marius. I definitely do it all by feel. I love this piece.
Yeah, but that was just the argument. I'm still at I love this piece. But the natural inclination is, at least in the this is Norwegian culture maybe, it's, you have the nice dishes, you bring them out for Christmas. Only Christmas, right? And so in the end, you end up using them once a year. And that's kind of ingrained that you shouldn't, in quote, waste the nice stuff on every day. So for me, that's just battling that ingrained habit.
Yeah, I agree with you, Adam. I feel like there's a place for a deeper cut. I think it would be really interesting to see, if it emerges from Wafudo or elsewhere. Wink, wink. But
yeah, you should write it.
Something that's more challenging. It's like, okay, so... But, as I said, it's kind of deceptively simple, but I think that there could be something that was another look at some of these questions.
Yeah.
I have to do a bit of groundwork, I have to talk to Iamoto first and say, hey, I've got the idea of writing one that's coming from a Western brain rather than it's coming from the outside in rather than the inside out. What do you reckon? And maybe if you advise the idea, maybe. But yeah, there's other things to publish before that.
There's way too few advanced T-books in English. I think that one of the things, and I felt it a little bit in your book too, in that people are not crystal clear on who they're writing for and why they're writing. That should be a bloody post-it, and it should be like straight over your computer screen every day. I'm writing for an experienced audience. Purpose is to do this, right? It's so easy to slip. It's so easy to I'm writing for the advanced people. And then you go into who is Ricky, right? That's the traditional pitfall. Everybody who's had a cup of tea more than 10 times know who Rikyu is. You don't need to tell us about it. Then you need to have some revolutionary stuff that you're unlikely to have unless you invented it. But really that crystal clear target group, and I feel like you see some books that are not crystal clear on perspective either, but that also is maybe an editor can help with that, but from the content wise, it needs to be like, why am I writing this and for whom am I writing this? And then we want advanced tea books, please.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. Yeah, and by the way, what I really liked about the book is what I've been requesting in regards to this Namporoku or all the other translations that are done of famous tea texts is don't be so conscious about the original and don't try to teach me Japanese while you're teaching me tea. And it's a lot of the translation spends so much time on this word really has 7 meanings and it has 14 connotations and it might mean this and it might mean that. But but if I had the skills to evaluate all this stuff, I would just read the original. What I need is someone to go through, make kind of a best interpretation and maybe have the forward that says many, many words in this. I had to do some choices. In the appendix, I have added some information about that, but during the text, I'm about trying to reproduce what I think the meaning is.
Yeah.
And I think you had 2 or 3 places where you, in the Pearl Among the Clouds, tried to explain Japanese, but I'm certain there was hundreds of opportunities. So good work.
Ah, thanks. Yeah, there was hundreds of opportunities. Yeah, the central concept of beauty is a hard one. The rin, being ideal of beauty. Yeah. So once that explanation was out of the way, we were off.
Shosa.
That's good. Shosa was another. Yeah, they're probably the two. That they come out in the first. That's in the introduction basically, I think. Yeah. Shosa, the heartfelt gestures, the gesture or an action that shows you.
But there's a difference between establishing kind of a noun or a concept, right? That's fine, right? That's lifting my skill level. But when it comes to deeper interpretations and combination of this kanji is built up of this and that, and then it becomes more linguistics for me, and my brain just fogs over.
You have to remember, Marius, that most translators get a really, really big high on linguistic discussion.
I know,
including me. But yeah, translators have to be reminded that not every people is as geeky as they are in that field.
Yeah, and that's the key thing. That's what's on the post-it note. You're not writing this for yourself, and you're not even writing this for a younger version of yourself, because the younger version of yourself will eventually be able to read the original and will be happy about that. You will be writing this for someone who can't and probably never will be able to read it. Are we doing a poem or are we already an hour into it?
With editing would be under an hour. Let's do the poem.
Yeah.
87. I remember now, it's the one after Bonseki. Here's the original Japanese. Ita-doko ni ha-cha-tsubo cha-ire shina-jina wo kazara de kazaru mo arikeri. Once more. Ita-doko ni ha-cha-tsubo cha-ire shina-jina wo kazara de kazaru mo arikeri. Okay, so the English translation is: a board floor alcove rejects precious pieces like tea jars for display, but should the occasion call, there are other rules to obey. Once more. A board floor alcove rejects precious pieces like tea jars for display, but should the occasion call, there are other rules to obey. So what does that mean, Sarah?
Brutal. Is this your idea of a joke?
No, this actually magnifies the challenge of teaching online, because you can only encounter so much in your private tea practice online. But if you're practicing in Japan, and you're practicing different cha-shitsu, and one of those cha-shitsus happen to have a board floor alcove or an ita-doko, where you'd be aware that there are different rules for display. Actually, one of the first tea gatherings I ever did, I encountered this problem, because I'd only ever practiced with the tatami floor alcove at Keiko with my sensei in both places. And I went to do a cha-ire, and there was a board floor alcove. And so I got like a lacquered underboard to put the flower vase on top. And people, what are you doing, Adam? I'm like, displaying the flower like I always do. Like, you don't use a board for a wooden floor alcove. I don't know. It's like, take it easy. I almost bit my head off. But so a wooden board alcove is the shingyo so. It's the most informal way of display. So you don't use vases that necessitate having an underboard. So you should use vases that you can use without having an underboard underneath the vase. And the vase goes directly on the alcove floor. And so it's saying here, must be a very old poem because back when the protocol of displaying a tea jar and cha-ire were in fashion, which is quite early in tea's history, it would be a little bit indelicate to display something of such high value in such an informal setting. So tea jar is like the most prestigious piece in anyone's tea collection back then, and then probably second to that would be a cha-ire. So to display these two items on a wooden board alcove would be not a good idea because the drop from shin to so is so dramatic. But if you need to, you can find a way to do it, is what they're trying to say. So what a great poem for everybody that practices tea overseas.
I agree with the last one. I've had my tsubo in my doko tokonomo for all winter in a cabin. I put it there for an event and it was like, yeah, it looks nice, keeps me company. It's better there than in a box.
Totally agree.
Now it's been there for a long, long time. And one of the things that I noticed when I started building tea rooms is that you're going to end up with ita-doko much more often than you're going to end up with anything else. Because Western rooms don't happen to have an extra tatami of space where you can put the tokonoma. And then if you have space for an extra tatami, you're not going to make a tokonoma of it. You're going to get your 4.5 mat instead of your 3 mats, right? That's how it's going to play out. And then the tokonoma is just going to be whatever's left after you put down the yojohan. So that's what happens in all my rooms. So I have the yojohan has a ita-doko, my 3 mat has a ita-doko, and my new 3 mat is going to have a moss doko. That's not a poem about that yet, but that's...
You happy to release that out in the public audience,
yeah,
Marius?
It's going to be...
Not top secret?
No,
okay.
It's not top secret. It just needs to get done first. I need to do some welding practice during the summer so I can weld my rusted steel tokonoma in place. And then I'm going to have a sheet of moss, green moss as the base for the tokonoma to contrast the hard steel tokonoma.
Love it.
I like that.
That's great.
So Adam, why was your impulse to put a lacquer tray down? It seems like a bridging of divides between Shingyo and So. It just doesn't do it, it doesn't cover it.
No, I don't always use it like a tray. It's the things you have to think about. If it's a cha-tsubo or cha-ire, so even like the fabric for a cha-tsubo is a very, very good fabric. So if you're going to put the little hat on the cha-tsubo and you have like the under fabric that you rest the cha-tsubo on too, it's super high grade. So even that is a clash between the wooden things. So people think that maybe you just put that on and that's all okay, but actually the fabric is quite sophisticated in the high grade itself. But you can do things like you might put it on some paper, for example. So like when you do a scroll display on an alcove, if it's a scroll by an emperor's hand, you put it on like a special lacquered tray to display the scroll. Or if it's just by a noble person, you put the scroll on some paper. But if it's just by your mate down the road, you just display the scroll straight on the alcove. So things like this like give you hints about what you could do if you had a wooden floor alcove and cha-tsubo. So you might like, instead of having the fabric, you could put the cha-tsubo on like some folded paper or something like that. Maybe that would work. I don't know. But that would seem pretty good to my eyes. Take what you got from different contexts and then mix it together, and there are different rules to obey. And of course, you should allow yourself a lot more liberty when you're doing tea outside of Japanese context, where you don't have all these bibs and bobs and don't have access to different things and different display opportunities.
One of the things that I've noticed is that when you get your own tea space, some of these variation that seems fun and interesting when you learn about them, in the end it's because if you only have a ita-doko, well, you're going to do the special ita-doko things every time. So that pretty soon becomes your new standard way of doing it. So I feel like unless you for some reason have access to lots and lots of tea spaces to do tea in, you will want to break a lot of these rules that has to do with specific concerns in relation to the room. Like, so robuchi. Say you have a small room, are you never going to use a lacquered robuchi? Well, what if you got a lacquered robuchi for someone? Right? You got it as a present. Are you just going to put it in a box and never use it? Of course not. Right? You're going to bring it out and use it at the first opportunity. So a lot of those...
I don't know, Marius. I'm sure there'll be some people that go, well, of course you don't use it.
If anyone has this problem, that you have a piece of dogu and you have a different room that you can't use it, just send it to me. I'll use the dogu.
That's a good solution. Vacuum clean.
Yeah, so for me that becomes like I noticed this when I had a 3-mat room to begin with, right? That there's lots of things you're not supposed to do in a koma that you're like, yeah, but I want to use a tana. I've done hakobi last 4 events. No, I want to do something else.
Actually, Marius, I mean, bring up that point. The Fukuro Dana, one that you both were very fond of at Wafudo, that is the only tana that you're meant to use in a koma, apparently. So maybe you can extrapolate that idea to using something with maybe a couple of tiers on it in a koma. Suggest the Fukuro Dana. Yeah, ideas like this.
Yeah, I never got around to building one. I need to build one.
Please. Remember to build 2.
3. I lost my wood shop.
Yeah, Dan, that's yes.
Yeah, this feels like a good point to end today's episode. Just want to give a shout out to our patrons that help us edit in practice. So now we don't need to spend another 3-4 hours editing. We're really, really happy we don't have to. And a lot less episodes would have been made if we needed to edit them ourselves. So a huge thank you to all patrons. And I've also added on our support page on the TeaLife Audio a few new free Amazon services you can try out. And I use both of them myself. So that's Prime Video and Audible. And if you choose to use our links, the podcast get a little something in return. So if you do, a big thank you. And a big thank you for Sarah for joining. It was really nice talking to you. Great to have you on.
It was wonderful to be here. It's good to see you again. And Adam, thank you too.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
This has been a production of TeaLife Audio. Producing an episode requires a bit of time and money. We do the work for free and hope you will help us cover the cost. Go to tealife.audio/support to help us bring another episode to your tea world. The taste of matcha when there is no one to talk tea. TeaLife Audio.